This is the first in a series of videos covering how to use the prompts in the 2.6 and later version of the Paint by Numbers system. In this video, we'll be covering the brainstorming prompts. If you're new to the Paint by Numbers system and or Novelcrafter, one of the first things you need to do after you've created your template novel based on the Paint by Numbers systems guide, the part 1 of the guide, go to Create Novel, Use Template Novel, and then you're going to select that template, which in my case is called _story_template_2.6. We want to keep the codex, the structure's fine, point of view, language, all that's fine. And then until I've got a first draft written, I always preface all my story titles with idea and placeholder for this novel, we're going to call Timeless Conflict. Alright, so what we see is it's now copied the template, so we have all of our story notes prompts, the template codex entries, the placeholder characters, AI-isms. So everything that was in the template is now in this novel. One of the first things you're going to want to do is set up past or present tense, your language settings. I think for this one I'm going to go with third person omniscient. And then if we had a character already created, we would set them as the point of view character. We don't have a name, we don't have a story, but we do have a mock-up of a cover. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And this is basically, you can take any picture you've created or got on your system and then bring it in here. And in this case, really nothing to crop because it's actually in the correct format. Now, since I already have a rough idea of what genres this story is going to be, I'll go ahead and fill those in the kind of the template of Notes 100. So it's science fiction. Secondary genres, I'm not sure. Age group, but definitely going to be a novel. So that's all I know now. Story idea. I do have some story ideas. 3 different story ideas. I'm going to copy those in and then continue. Yesterday I was testing this whole process and I've created a test novel that has the codex entries with the story idea. So the way I'm going to copy those in is I will go and open the test novel and I can select one of these codex entries, click on the 3-dot menu, and down here where it has move to, we will find and so on. I've returned to the novel in progress, and we can see now that the story ideas 103A, B, and C. And basically these are, as I was thinking about the idea, realized that I could do one where maybe it's just these 2 immortal tech billionaires who are working on creating their first, to establish the first technocracy to rule the world, or taking that another step and turning it into a cyberpunk thing where they own 2 mega corporations are going at it. But the idea I like the most is kind of taking from current events, but we've got 2 tech billionaires who want to be the first on Mars. And the general premise is Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan, although they lived about 1,000 years apart, their empires, their conquests, both overlapped in Persia. And there's a Persian myth about the tree of life, and if you eat the fruit from the tree of life, you gain immortality. And mostly we think of immortality as you just continue to live forever. And I thought instead that you live a normal life, you die, but then you're reincarnated. And as a child, they, retain some sense that they are an immortal, that they've lived before, but they don't have full access to all their knowledge and skills. Those are only gained when they reach full adulthood. And so as over multiple lifetimes, both of these individuals have reincarnated multiple times and have learned different skills. Now they're, and they've been competing against each other unknowingly. And so now they're trying to be the first on Mars. So that's where we start. Our first step is to go into chat and then go into the PBN menu. And if you haven't used PBN before, go ahead and use this type begin to start prompt and literally do what the title says. Type begin, click send, and then it will walk you through the different ways to initiate actions within a prompt. But yeah, so if you ever need help in any prompt, type usage or help, and it will give you a little menu of here's the things you need to do, here's what this prompt does, here's the required codex entries. Some of the more complex ones, if you type learn, it will actually explain to you step by step what it's doing. And if it's using something like the mice quotient and you're unfamiliar with the mice quotient, then it will give you a short tutorial on what the mice quotient is and why you'd use it. For LLMs that ask a lot of questions, and I've noticed Claude 3, I think Haiku, and even Sonnet sometimes, when you tell it, ask me qualifying questions. They will literally ask you questions until you run out of messages in chat queue. So you tell it to proceed, and that instructs it to stop asking questions and go ahead and carry out the instructions in the prompt. And then as you'll see as I'm going through here, the sequence of operations is generally you run a prompt, maybe you answer some questions, you'll give some feedback, but you copy the output to a snippet, you give the snippet a name, and then you edit the snippet, and then once you're satisfied with what's in the snippet, then you copy that into like one of the notes codex entries, or you may end up copying it into plan or write. But we want to start with the first of the brainstorming prompts. So we'll go to brainstorm, define genres, genre setter, and my current favorite for a lot of this stuff is Grok 3 Mini, and we will type begin. So it's printed out a list of the major genres, and this list is actually in the prompt itself. It doesn't use its own knowledge. I've already wrote in science fiction, but I kind of like the idea that the secondary genre would be adventure. So I'm going to say science fiction, adventure. We'll go with new adult. Novel, I can type it right. Go ahead and pin that. Adventure, adult. And it tells us save the output, so we've run that. And run the subgenres setter prompt. And so what you'll see here is the prompt automatically attaches note 100 and note 103. But if you had your information in a different codex, you could change these. So like I don't currently have my story idea in note 103. I actually have it in note 103C. So I can go here, change it like that. And we'll do usage to make sure that we're doing everything right. So yeah, simple one. Type begin or start, answer questions, save the output to a name snippet, and then we'll update note 100 when we're done. I like hard science fiction, but let's go with soft science fiction because it's mostly about the characters and, of course, the societal impacts of immortality. Ooh, alternate history. Try that. And I'm going to combine space adventure and survival adventure because they eventually end up stranded on Mars. Space survival adventure. Outdoor planetary. The more the merrier. I actually want to manually copy these again. So now I have explanations in case I forget or need some clarification later on. So now we'll move on to kind of actually already breaking the rules. Didn't save the output to a name snippet, but I'm pretty sure those will be, we've got enough. But now we'll move on to Tropes Explorer. You can see again we've already attached note 100, so it knows to go in and look at the primary and secondary genre and subgenres to come up with a list of tropes. And if you've made significant changes, maybe you decided, well, I don't want it to be science fiction. I want it to be something else. I want it to be a horror, thriller, romance, something like that. I would start a new chat session so everything that we've done prior is no longer in memory. Let's go for bro 2, 3, and 4. Show me what you got. It is a long list, so I am definitely going to save this as tropes. And I always like to save which version of, or which LLM model I use, because if I decide to do kit bashing, I don't want to use the same model, I want to use a different model. Star it so it's top of the list. And I'm going to pick some of these and come back. So I found quite a few tropes that I'm interested in, and because this is our zero draft, we're throwing everything into it. You know, this is the kitchen sink approach. Some of these things we may not use, but at least starting out in our zero draft where we're still trying to get a feel for the story, we're going to use all of it. And then like before, I'm going to copy and paste all these tropes into note 100. Mentions here to make a comma separated list of tropes to add to note 100, but I'm doing the bullet thing so I can refer to these later, and the comma separated list will then go into story genres. So at this time, we will do that. We will populate the story genres codex. Simple way to do that is do copy. And do we have that by default? We do. So pin that. Start at the top. That's good. Subgenres. And I'll finish this off screen and we'll come back. So I've converted everything to comma separated lists for subgenres and tropes. So now we're finished updating the story genre codex. Our next step is to start a new chat session. I don't need that anymore. Start a new chat session. And move on to the Speculative Scenario Explorer. And this is for anyone who writes speculative fiction. So your science fiction, fantasy, horror. The point of this prompt is to flesh out unique ideas or something that maybe hasn't been done in the genre before. Say, for example, you're writing a fantasy novel and you want to come up with a unique magic system, and you wonder, well, what would it be like if magic was something that was done through soup? So a soup-based magic system. Well, you would use the speculative idea prompt to flesh that out and find out, how would that work? And maybe it's not a good idea, or maybe it is the next thing that's going to set the world on fire. So in my case, I'm going to say it's a science fiction story, and I will type begin. So yeah, I've already selected this genre, and my scenario is immortality with a twist that people have gained immortality from the fruit of the tree of life, die after living a normal life, and then are reincarnated. During childhood, they are aware they've lived before, but slowly regain their memories and skills learned in the previous lives. They're often labeled as child prodigies, and then at adulthood, they regain all memories and skills. So let's see what it has to say about that idea. It's a fascinating concept. You are so awesome and wonderful and amazing. Rich potential. So anyway, biological genetic, source of advanced biotechnology. There's an idea. Yeah, maybe it's a alien tree. Supernatural memory, tension, reincarnation. But again, the whole purpose of this prompt is just a way for you to brainstorm a specific idea within speculative fiction. And one thing to note is this has its own individual command that you'll do your back and forth conversation, but when you're finally ready to come up with a fully fledged filled out report or whatever, you type print it, and then it will organize all your thoughts into something logical that you can then put into a codex entry. But in this case, we're just going to save it as a snippet and move on. And we will start a new chat session. A lot of times for stuff like this, where if I've already saved it into a snippet, I don't need the chat. I don't plan on using it again, so I will delete the thread. Some people like to name. You can name your chats and go back and search them. But again, my sequence is, I do a bunch of work in chat and then move that off to a snippet, clean up the snippet, and then the snippet gets moved into either a codex entry or into write. So our next step is brainstorm, story idea wizards, idea expander, and we'll try Gemini 2.0 Flash. So here's another one where it's already selected note 103, and I still have not moved that, so I still have in this case I'll go ahead and copy it because that's the one I've chosen to use. But the idea with multiple story ideas is the fact that you can reiterate. You could run this against all three of those and decide, okay, this is actually the novel I want to write. let's go ahead and expand the idea where they're tech billionaires fighting to be the first on Mars. So it comes up with a list of questions, which are actually built into the prompt. And I'll go ahead and answer these, and then we'll come back. I've answered all the questions that the prompt provides, and you don't necessarily need to answer all of them, and just answer what you know. In my case, this is an very old story idea, and I've actually kind of thought about it over the weekend, kind of did some dry runs, so I know a lot more about this story than I thought I did. But one thing that it brings up is there is currently a request to allow multiple chat sessions within Novelcrafter. In this case, I actually found that would have been helpful. I was trying to remember the name of the large kind of Grand Canyon place on Mars where I want the story to take place, Valles Marineris, so I had to go out and use, in my case, I used Microsoft's Copilot, but an external chatbot to answer some questions, and also went ahead and created some locations for Valles Marineris and for Mars. So that's something I will probably vote to have it added as a feature. Not that it's that big of a deal, but it is kind of nice to be able to have multiple chat threads open just to go out and ask another question. But as far as like the prompt's concerned, the idea is just, answer what you know, and then let the AI work with that. So here it's telling me I should type proceed, but we went ahead and proceeded anyway. So that's the great thing about chatbots, is they often ignore you. So it's saying, well, what events do I want to happen? And this is kind of a change from the previous versions where it was all about, scenes and following the key plot elements of a plot structure. But more and more I'm thinking, well, in a zero draft, you really think about events. This happens, then this happens, and because of this thing, then this happens. And so it's more along the lines of like if you're retelling, if you just went to the movie and now you're telling a friend about what the movie was about, you don't really say, okay, so at this moment we had the inciting incident, and then there was the pinch, and then there was the plot twist, and then we got to the climax. And you just say, well, the movie starts out here, and then this thing happens, and then this thing happens, which causes this thing to happen, and basically you're just relaying a series of events. And so that's kind of where I'm headed with the next versions, with this version of the PBN, and probably in the future, is lay out everything as events and then put the structure around it afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and come up with some events, and we'll come back to it. I've come up with some events, so it's time to move on to the next step. I'm going to call this a semi-sweet ending. Both men learn what they need to survive further reincarnations, but their current incarnations aren't going to get the fame and glory they expected from landing on Mars. So now I need to take all that information and update Note 103. Rather than manually adding all this information in Note 103, I'm going to instruct the LLM or the prompt to do it for me. And depending on how that turns out, I will update the prompt so it does it automatically and doesn't need to be prompted. So it looks like it did. So just to be sure, I'm going to save it to a snippet, make any edits, and then copy that in Note 103 and come back. I've updated Note 103, so let's proceed to the end of the idea expander prompt. Living up to its title, the idea expander prompt has even more questions to expand the story idea, so I will answer those and return when I'm finished. I've answered the next set of questions, so it's time to finish this prompt. All right, let's proceed. And as always, I'll save it to a snippet, make some edits, and then copy it to Note 105, and we can move on to the next prompt. get a fresh start, I'm going to start a new chat session. And let's try my friend Claude 35 Haiku. We'll go ahead and see what romance and mystery might look like. That makes sense to add a mystery element to it. So yeah, I think I'm going to add that as, I guess, a third genre. I'm going to add mystery to note 100. So let's call it adventure mystery, and we will update story genres. Now, if I were fully intending to write this story, I would probably rerun some of the earlier prompts to see, okay, what type of subgenres might that add, and what type of tropes might that add. But in this case, for sake of time, we're just going to throw it in there and let the AI work on it, figure it out as we continue to expand the idea and build out the plot. To ensure that none of the romance stuff ends up in the output of the next prompt, we'll go ahead and start a new chat session. We don't need this, so we'll delete the thread. The basic plot generator. This time we'll use Grok 3 Mini instead of Gemini. So begin. Oh yeah, and this one actually creates 3 potential plot lines, so plenty of opportunities for kit bashing. One of the nice things about this prompt is that first it shows you the original story idea and breaks it down into a stasis, disruption, reaction loops and by acts. So you might look at that and go, yeah, that's the story I want. I'm going to stick with that. But these 3 potential plot outlines may be an even more interesting story, or again, you can kit bash them into the perfect story. Another thing to keep in mind is that the PBN is not designed to be a rigid structure that you have to go from, step 1 all the way to step 100 or whatever the last step may be. At any point when you decide that you've got enough that you want to start writing a story, you can go ahead and do that. It's the whole point of the PBN, at least through the brainstorming and planning, is to create your 0 draft so that you can then write your first draft. And whenever you feel comfortable, you can go off and do that. And if need be, come back and iterate on your ideas or run additional prompts to generate new ideas, to expand on your current ideas. But I'm going to go ahead and save these as a snippet to work on later so we can actually get through the prompts as opposed to actually trying to write the story. So our next prompt is Idea Critic. Again, we want to, I'm not planning on saying this, delete the thread, start a new chat session. Let's give Claude 3.5 a try. And this is using, what I've already put in Note 105 or what we came up with through the last prompt. See what Drunken Claude has to say. Okay, so this one actually is very much bullet items, where other LLMs, it's more narrative, but same thing, tells you your story is stupid. Well, in this case, I guess he thinks that's good. Okay. Possibility, yeah, hand waved. What's mythology? Come on. 6 out of 10. But yeah, now you could have a back and forth or use these ideas to improve upon your basic plot brainstorm before you move on to the note or the prompts in 110, story tone and settings. And while I'm sure there are some useful ideas in here, I'll just save it as a snippet. And move on. Ooh, let's try the Microsoft one. 5.4. Let's do usage to find out what plan and edit buttons do. Just emotional arcs for the story ideas or find next. Select plan or edit from the drop down. If using edits. Okay, so edit was if you've imported a novel, then it will tell you what the emotional arc is. So in our case, we're starting from scratch, so we'll say plan. And required is note 105, plot brainstorm. Rise, Fall, and Rise, the Cinderella arc. I get that one a lot. Apparently that's my favorite emotional arc. But we'll go ahead and now add that to note 100. Now if we type learn, there we go. Explains the mice quotient. So begin. So yeah, so it says the primary mice quotient elements are milieu, because they're spending a lot of time on Mars, so we learn a lot about Mars, and character, about their personal growth. They're saying milieu is the primary. Well, I think it's more of a character than milieu, but see where that takes us. This in. So at this point, we've just got one last set of prompts to get through for our brainstorming, and we'll get into character building, which will be the next video. So let's go ahead and delete this. Start a new chat session. Hook and logline prompts. Use Gemini because it's fast. In this case, I'm actually just going to manually copy these and put them into note 107. Yeah, I'm doing like that one either. Let's make us a log line. I like the Killigator one the best, so copy that. And if I didn't like any of them, I'd just run it again with probably a different LLM. And now the last of the brainstorming, logline into 3 sentences. See if it has a snippet so we can edit it before we copy it into Note 111. And again, we could also, if we weren't crazy about this, we could run it again or run it with a different LLM and kit bash the results together. So the third summary sounds really interesting. So that's the one I'm going to save to Note 111. So at this point, we've run out of brainstorming prompts. Going to end here, and then the next video we'll pick up with the character building process. If you have any questions, I highly recommend joining the Novelcrafter Discord. Thanks for watching and keep writing. Future readers are waiting for your stories.